Hello, and welcome back to the Going Off Track podcast. I'm Kathryn. That's Paul. He is back because Emily is stuck at work again. So thank you for bailing us out last second again.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about interesting things like the race in Mexico.
Yeah, it was really. I don't know rating wise what I would necessarily rate it, but it was a good race, and what I will say is that I'm really glad it ended up being a 2-stop, because I feel like if it was just a 1-stop, like we all kind of thought it was going to be at the beginning of the day, it really would have been a lot less exciting than what we ended up being given.
I agree, and if you forgive Lando Norris for just taking off and saying "see you later, bye" to everybody, there were some moments of great excitement. There were some moments of utter chaos, and then we have to talk about the end and why.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a minute since Rui Marquez, who's the race director, has actively gone and ruined a race. This kind of really stood out as like it's been a minute since he's been relevant, and now he needs to go away again, because we really need this to not happen ever.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when Crofty and Karun and I agree all at the same time, I have to wonder if this either A, the sky is falling, or B, maybe we're all right and somebody else is wrong.
It tends to be kind of weird when that happens. But yeah, this was very much like of all of the drivers who, if they're pulling off of the track because their car is disabled, I really do think that Carlos very easily could have just done what most drivers would have done and just parked the car wherever it was going to end up, and not like basically made sure that nobody actually needed to take the car off. Let me back up a little bit. Every time, which I know this was only twice, when Crofty or Karun were like, you'll be able to see Carlos's car in just a moment. And I'm watching the feed and I'm like, I can't see Carlos's car, because Carlos took the car off of the track and out of danger of being hit by any of the other drivers.
Correct. And it was right at a moment where, yes, P1 had been decided for, the last,
entire race.
Thank you very much. But you had this wonderful competition for P2, P3, which by lap 71 was going to be heavily contested and heavily involved. And Max had the opportunity, but for this virtual safety car that didn't need to be called, because the car in question was behind barriers and not in anybody's racing line.
Yeah, that was really not great. And I mean, we all know that the reason why we wanted to see it play out was A, Max v Charles is always a great battle, but B, obviously Max is fighting for the championship still, and to move into it, obviously with the win, Lando overtakes Oscar in the drivers' championship fight, because Oscar had like another weekend to forget, and I'm not going to get my dreams of no more Mr. Nice Oscar apparently. But I do want to caveat this with Lando's only winning by 1 point, so everyone needs to calm down.
Yes, and Oscar did not race poorly.
No, he actually recovered a lot more than I expected him to.
He did very well, and he actually did one undercut, I believe, on George. Was it on George Russell?
I think so.
That was absolutely genius with their pit crew, and was able to get ahead of him and really made up points that potentially he was not going to be able to get.
Yeah, no, Oscar, I was impressed by both Oscar and Max with the way that they performed, because obviously the entire weekend, Oscar was nowhere, and Max also did not have a lot of really great pace on Saturday between both P3 and qualifying. Obviously in qualifying, Max was nowhere. And on a track like Mexico, if you're nowhere in qualifying, then you're kind of, I didn't think that there was any way Max was going to get a podium. So I thought that that was impressive. And then Oscar to be able to make up a couple positions after losing out on positions at the beginning of the race. Oscar may be not in the best position right now, but I don't think he's out quite yet. Obviously, 1 point means obviously he's still in the running, but I think that mentally you can't count him out either.
I agree with that. I agree with that. And Max made I want to say it was like on lap six or seven, made a great lunge at Lewis Hamilton to try to get into third. And there was all kinds of chaos with a number of cars. And it was probably early on the most entertaining portion of the race. And on the next lap, Lewis got pushed off the driving line and ended up returning into the race, but not using the emergency road.
Right.
So
Yeah.
he got the 10-second penalty for that, which I know that Ferrari is very unhappy with. But everybody was investigated, and I thought that Max was on the clean side of the track. So to come to from P5 to P3 early on before he couldn't navigate the turn was gutsy as hell.
Yeah, it really was from the little bits that I was able to watch while I was also in the middle of calling a basketball game with no numbers on the front of a jersey, which let me tell you is difficult. It was very chaotic, and obviously there's definitely a little bit of what Max did on lap one was deemed a racing incident because it was lap one, whereas Lewis was a few laps in, which is why he got the penalty. And Ferrari, I think Ferrari, they didn't like it, but they did accept it. I don't think we're going to continue hearing them make a big stink about it as they would if this was another type of situation, because yes, it sucks. And obviously Lewis's radio, he made it very clear how he felt about that. But I don't think that they're going to make a really big stink about it because it was one of those you're in the wrong type of deals. So there's that. And then from a Max standpoint, Max being able to recover from that chaotic beginning, obviously he was behind Ollie Bearman for a little while and it took the pit stops to get through that. But to go back to my point about the Max v Charles at the end that we were deprived of, that with that tire differential would have been very exciting, that last lap and a half. Thank you, Rui Marquez. Max would only have cut into Lando's advantage by 3 points. So instead of being back by 36, Max would be back by 33. And of course, that's Max's original number. So you'd have that, kind of storyline there. And that's the only thing that we're really currently lacking from it. But Max is still a sprint weekend worth of points behind, which is still in shouting distance from both McLarens.
Absolutely. And I think we have to give kudos to Red Bull for a unique tire strategy in the top 8, because both Red Bulls were on mediums to start the race where everyone else was on softs. So while it was not the best tire, it was a competitive tire and kept them in the running late in the race when everybody went to mediums. And the medium started to fall off after a while. Well, the softs really didn't, and they ended up being on the softs. Max did do a one-stop race, but the people that did 2 stops went back to the softs and actually did much better.
Yeah, exactly. It also really goes to show you that Max and Yuki were both on that same tire strategy. And Bernie Collins pointed this out. She was on the pit wall, which is always great when we have a Bernie Collins weekend, is that based on where you qualify, significantly impacted both Yuki and Max's races just by virtue of where the tires were, what tires they were using, and who they were competing against. And, Yuki fell back a little bit, and Yuki was, had another meh kind of race, and Max was able to get ahead purely because Max qualified, I wouldn't say significantly better since he qualified P5 and we know where Max can qualify. But I mean, Lando's car was just far and away from everyone this weekend. And credit to that, and credit to Lando giving McLaren their first win in Mexico since before I was born. So yes. It was a good weekend if you're a Lando fan, which
absolutely.
We are not.
And to be fair with Yuki was only in qualifying was, I believe, only 0.5 off of Max.
which
in
is where
qualifying.
he's been pretty much all season.
The entire season, yes.
Yeah, it's at least since he moved up to Red Bull. So it'll be interesting. Obviously, it has come out that Red Bull isn't going to be making any decisions that they implied that they were going to make after Mexico about Yuki's fate at Red Bull slash the second Red Bull seat, and this will be something that they're going to punt off to the winter. But before we move on to who else impressed, I do want to point out that Arvid Lindblad, who is the Red Bull rookie that drove in Max's car during FP1, which also I do think that Max might have had a better weekend had he had that extra hour of running.
Mm-hmm.
Lindblad beat out all of the rookies by a lot, and there were 8 other rookies in the field with him, and also beat a number of current F1 drivers, including Yuki. And we don't know the difference of run plans, especially the difference of run plans between Lindblad and Tsunoda, but I do think that it bodes well for whenever they're going to call up Lindblad to the Red Bull teams, that they have somebody who is going to be able to make an impact.
I have a sneaking suspicion that Lindblad is going to get one of the V-Carb seats for next season.
It's there's a lot of questions around whether that's, how it's going to work and who's going to fit in where, but mm-hmm. it wouldn't surprise me either way.
I agree. I think the, and you've talked about this before, the logical match is to put Isaac Hadjar with Max in the Red Bull, and then bring Lindblad up and have him matched up with Liam Lawson, who had a pretty dismal race.
Yeah, and also kind of almost accidentally killed some marshals.
Yeah, just a couple of marshals just decided to, I guess, clean the track right when Liam was on his way to doing wherever he was at the time.
Yeah.
So, as my favorite Maxwell Smart would say, missed it by that much.
Yeah, that was a little dicey. Obviously, there have been incidents like this in the past, but fortunately they are very rare and have not been as catastrophic as they could have been.
But there were a number of other competitors that actually impressed in this race, not to mention the top one being Ollie Bearman, getting his best finish as P4 and giving Haas their best finish since Austria in 2018.
Yeah, that was obviously Ollie Bearman running in P3 caused a lot of very, excitement. And I was sending some texts to Adam saying, I need this. And unfortunately, it didn't happen, which this does go to show you how much Haas has improved over the last couple of years. And I think we can credit that to, Ayo Komatsu, the team principal, Gene Haas's renewed desire to invest in his Formula One team instead of sometimes forgetting they exist, ? Allegedly. But yeah, Ollie is really shown that he is capable. Not obviously he's capable in a Ferrari, he's capable in a Haas, and this bodes well for the longevity of Ollie Bearman's career.
I agree. The only thing I would ding against Haas was the fact that on his second pit stop, and I want to say that he was trying to undercut George Russell,
possibly.
But George Russell has a recurring theme throughout this race, which we will get to momentarily. But they tried the undercut, and I think that second pit stop, the way they handled it, actually prevented him from getting onto the podium.
Yeah, there were some interesting strategy decisions between Haas and also Mercedes kind of shot themselves in the foot. And
I think it was actually Oscar. I think that Oscar and Ollie.
It was McLaren. Yeah,
it was McLaren. So, but it was just that you place your bets, you take your chances. And, they were trying to do the undercut and it didn't work.
Which it doesn't always work. I mean, I think it was Mercedes tried to undercut Max, and obviously that didn't work either. But yeah, and to continue speaking on who else impressed, Gabriel Bortoleto in a stake went from P16 to P10, and finally scored himself some points. Obviously, points are very hard to come by in a stake, and especially with what happened with Nico Hulkenberg, who of course was my P10 pick. That didn't happen. It was, Gabriel Bortoleto is another rookie who is definitely going to not be driving in a bright green turtle for long. Of course, because next year their car's not going to be green, but also,
that's par for the course. But I think Gabriel did a marvelous job. He had, he's got a lot of issues with the quality of that car, but they are solidly ninth, and they are pushing Haas for eighth.
Actually, Haas just jumped over because Haas picked up double points from their drivers today.
That's
but
right.
The battle for 8th and 9th, which when you're in 8th, 9th, 10th, you're scraping for any point you can get. There's only 2 points between them. Haas has 62, Stake has 60. So there's definitely a chance that we see more flip-flopping between those two teams. And Aston Martin in P7 is not that much further ahead. They have 69 points still.
Right.
They didn't get any points out of this weekend, but there could still be a lot of movement between, let's just say, 6 through 9.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I think, Williams is solidly in 5th. They're not going anywhere, and there may be some movement in 2, 3, and 4 between Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull, but that remains to be seen. But I think that the point distribution this season has been the best, I would say, in the last 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
With a lot more parity. Now, with the car and engine change next year, all bets are off.
Absolutely.
We'll have to see what transpires. Now, the other most impressive part of the Mexico Grand Prix this year, I think, were the Mercedes calls with George Russell.
Yeah, George's radio, he had some opinions today, and he had some thoughts. And he also had a McLaren up his insert word here, and he was very vocal about that fact.
Yes, and I think that was certainly a problem. It was Kimi Antonelli was, I think, running the best race that he could, but George was like, look, let me see if I can get into the third, get into the podium. That's what his goal was.
And the other thing that I think is significant about this is George was complaining about how he had so much more pace, but he really didn't have that much more pace over Kimi, and that was made pretty clear. And the reason why he's impressed is just because those radio calls were funny.
Oh yeah, the radio calls were redonkulous, but his additional pace, I don't think worked out to be more than 1 or 2 tenths.
Yeah, and I mean it's fair, especially when you have a car like the McLaren on you, and obviously Oscar was not the strongest McLaren of the weekend, clearly, but still is better than the Mercedes, more or less. And I can see why George was so aggressive about saying, we need to make this switch, and really taking a very vocal leadership position on the team, which he's always been like, I'm the lead driver, but this is a type of throwdown of I need us to do this strategy and try this that I don't think we've really seen out of George. That this is not George's favorite fan podcast, but it was impressive to see him kind of pull that out.
Oh, absolutely. I would compare it to what Carlos Sainz was doing at Williams, especially early in the season when we got to hear their radio calls, and it's where it sounded like Carlos was almost dictating strategy. Williams cars.
Well, no, that was when, I know you're thinking of, that was when Carlos was out of the race and he was giving the strategy for Alex.
Right. Yes.
Was that Australia? I think that was Australia.
I think it was Australia. Yes, I think it was Australia.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that's that's what the team concept is all about.
Right. Yeah. Which
Yeah.
you don't have on all of the teams. But
Yeah.
anyway, to move on to who disappointed, other than the race director for that stupid virtual safety car. Unfortunately, Lewis Hamilton did not have the day that Lewis Hamilton fans like my friend were hoping for.
No, it was a very difficult day.
But I think the most disappointing part of the weekend, Fernando Alonso has had the worst luck in Mexico
Yes.
that I have ever seen.
Yeah, and I can't explain it. This is his third consecutive DNF in Mexico. And he's it's not like he's been with the same, the same car and the same drive, the same drive and the same ride. It's just, if he didn't have bad luck in Mexico, he wouldn't have any luck at all.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Obvious, and I think they've all been like reliability related.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's of all the drivers to 3 years in a row not be able to finish the race. Like, of course it's Fernando, and Fernando's just like, is it time for the Adrian Newey car yet?
Yes, and can we get it onto the track now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost January, which is also it's also weird, but yeah, it's that poor guy. Hopefully they can get the gremlins out. Obviously, Aston Martin, like we said earlier, is in the running to attempt to move up in their fight with Racing Bulls. So they have a chance to come out of this in P6 if they can score some solid points. And we do have flashes of, I don't want to say brilliance, but we have flashes of like this being a decent upper midfield car, and then it stops doing that.
I think that it's from a driver perspective, I think Fernando is the best bet for Aston Martin.
Right.
And, I mean, for better or for worse, Lance has not performed as well as, I think he's just underperformed. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And, if Fernando, because Fernando had some top 5 starts that have been actually rather impressive. Now, it's can they get the car to run the entire race? That's another question, and they haven't been able to come up with the answer on that yet.
Yeah, and I think the answer is they need to take a look at what Haas is doing, because exactly what you just said of impressive starts, they can't keep the car at the level of the grid that they started, is exactly the problem that Haas had in the last couple of years, and this is kind of the first year that we've seen a Haas that can qualify in the top 10 and stay there.
Yes.
So,
yeah. No,
there's no partnership between those two teams, and obviously they're very, tightly competitive, but they should look at, shockingly, they should look to Haas if they want to perform better next year.
That wouldn't be a terrible thing, but
yeah.
But we will see.
It just feels weird to say.
Yeah, I know. So let's talk about predictions and how wonderfully we all did.
Yeah, predictions were bad again. And credit to Emily, she did get 1 point because she picked the correct pole driver. She picked Lando. We picked Max. But other than that, we just I would say that we were close on some choices. I think I was the closest. I was a McLaren driver off of getting the correct podium, just not the correct order. So the podium was obviously Lando, Charles, Max, and my podium pick was Max, Oscar, Charles. So if I did Max, Lando, Charles, I would have gotten 3 points, but I didn't. Emily had Max, George, and Charles, and you had Max, Oscar, Lewis, which to the start of the race was actually a pretty decent prediction.
Yeah, it was pretty close. But then, the length of this race, the fact that the track temperature was exceedingly high.
Yeah.
And my Celsius to Fahrenheit is not very good, but I think it was 53 degrees Celsius.
That's a
uh,
lot.
at the beginning of the race. So that's like, I want to say it's over 110. Um,
50. Let's see. 120 50 degrees is 122 degrees
okay,
Fahrenheit.
well, all
That's a
right.
lot of
So it was
temperature.
close to 130. So that's long, frying an egg. So
Yeah, no, I mean as somebody who's spent, a few summers living at altitude, that's really hot. And when
yes,
Karun was like the UV is high, I'm just like, yes, you're actually correct, and that's what happens when you're as close to the sun as you are when you're a mile up
yeah.
in elevation. Which I do think that between this race and next week in Sao Paulo, I think that we will see a lot different in handling. I don't necessarily know if McLaren is going to be able to pull another 38 per second gap in their lead car, just because I think that they were really able to figure out how to make the car go very fast in a way that it hasn't at sea level, and they'll have a little bit of that benefit because Sao Paulo is another one of those higher elevation tracks. Sao Paulo and Mexico are the top two, but I don't
Mhm.
think it's going to be as significant as what we've seen this week.
Yes, and not only that, Sao Paulo is a much longer track
Mm-hmm.
than Mexico is, and I really think that you're going to have some different issues because of the length of the track and how the turns and elevations go within that track. Because for all extensive purposes, Mexico is pretty much a very flat track.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of height elevation like you had at Austin the week before.
Yeah, with that
Um,
that vertical up to
yeah,
turn one.
exactly. So, and for P10, Gabriel Bortoleto, as we talked about earlier, coming back from P16, grad P10, blew all of our suggested P10s away.
I mean,
Uh,
I was right team, wrong driver. So
yeah, well, once again, it's the bridesmaid and bride. Always the bridesmaid, never the bride, right?
yeah, and then
There you
Emily picked Alex Albon, who, like Carlos Sainz, didn't have a great weekend, and you chose Kimi Antonelli, who did better than P10. So good for him.
exactly,
And
exactly.
to move on to our standings, going into the weekend, I had 12 points. Emily had 9. Now Emily has 10. So it is getting closer, and we will see how many points we can scramble to pick up between now and the end of the season.
Tightening up with 4 races to go.
Yep. And 2 of them are sprints.
That's it. That's it. So, for our biggest surprise, you had suggested that McLaren was going to back Oscar. And the answer to that
Nope.
was nope.
I will say that they probably did less damage to him psychologically this week just because of how far apart they were on track, Lando and Oscar. And I do think that they were able to give him a good enough strategy that got him his battle with Ollie Bearman for P4 was just like Max and Charles's battle for P2. So his race engineer Tom Stallard was able to help Oscar get to that point. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I would get any imaginary non-existent points for my prediction of McLaren backing Oscar, but they didn't not back him.
That's true. Now, had they been, P1, P2, or P2, P3, and had been, much closer, I think that, everybody will be talking about papaya rules and, free to race and all of those types of things.
Right,
Um,
exactly. And if I
so I
never
don't,
have to hear papaya rules again, it will be too soon.
it will be too soon. Yes. So now for my big surprise, I did say that Haas was going to get double points, which they did.
Yeah, that was impressive for them, and yeah, this goes to speak to that fact that every weekend it's a new midfield team that is showing signs of life.
Which I truly believe is good for the sport.
Oh, absolutely. I think
Yeah.
it's great.
Yeah. So how did you do on your dumb?
I think my dumb, I will give myself partial non-existent credits. I said that somebody was going to pull a Checo on the opening lap in 2023. Obviously, Max did some creative lawn mowing. Lewis did some creative lawn mowing as well. But I do. It fortunately was not crash-like.
Right. Well,
So
no, we all like exciting racing, and we don't necessarily have to have carnage to have exciting racing.
no, which was proved for with this race. There was a lot of exciting racing. It just wasn't for P1.
Correct. Yes, because as we said before, Lando just said, "See you later, bye."
Yeah, exactly. It was one of those. It was very Max in 2023 of like, oh, we should check in with the race leader to see what they're what. I'm talking, Sven. Anyway, there's a very loud, very dramatic German Shepherd to my right who has opinions on Lando Norris, and they are very whiny, which is par for the course.
Yeah, exactly. Now my dumb, I actually came pretty close. I had said that there was going to be angst at Alpine, and I can tell you that in qualifying, we did get a wonderful view of Flavio Briatore just loving every minute of Franco Colapinto's race run, where he ended up P20 once again.
Yeah, they were nowhere.
They were at the back of the pack, so I think they ended up being 15th and 16th because they were the last two. They were the last two cars on the track.
Yeah, by virtue of attrition, they were not P19 and P20, but they're in the basement, and they're I don't really think that they're even in the mix for moving up to P9 in the championship, just by virtue of the fact that they only have scored 20 points this year. All of them have obviously come from Pierre Gasly. Hello, Lemons. We have a guest who's also standing on her sister. Hi. You're just going to stand here?
That's par for the course.
She likes to just kind of, hop on and just stand and stare. But anyway, yeah, Alpine was nowhere, and they will continue to be nowhere. They also had Paul Aaron on track in FP1, who is the other contender for Franco Colapinto's seat. And Aaron was fine. He didn't light it up, but I mean, the only rookie who did was Lindblad, and obviously he's also still driving a turtle. So I don't think there's really, much to say when the car is bad. And it'd be like, if you put Paul Aaron in a better car, how would he perform? Because he's only ever driven an Alpine or a Stake this year. So
yeah, no, I agree with you, but I think really the best dumb we have is the virtual safety car.
Yeah, that was really the dumb of the weekend. And before we move on to final thoughts, I do want to, Emily is not here, but for an off-track moment, I do want to point out, going back to that FP1 again and going back to George Russell again, George decided to take in FP1 not from the team garage, but from the stadium section, and wore a luchador mask so that he wouldn't get mobbed by the fans. But he was just sitting there watching, taking videos on his phone. I think it was of Fred Vesti when Fred Vesti was driving in his car, and was like, hey, George Russell's a really great driver. And these poor fans that he's walking by are just so confused because they had no idea it was him.
Yeah, I did see that. I thought that's a very good moment, and good on him for connecting with the fans, even though most of the people just didn't know who he was.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great, and it really goes to point out, you can't watch a race while also participating in it. And so George hasn't taken in a Formula One race as a fan since his F2 days, maybe even before that. And he's like, I'm just gonna see what there is to see during free practice for a little bit. So I thought that was entertaining.
Yeah, exactly. So but it's still a different. You're looking at the race differently. than when you're in the stands and really getting the crowd and hearing what you don't always hear because you're in the middle of it.
Right, exactly. So yeah, so that was fun. I'm sure that was a fun experience for George. And once again, Formula One social media is some of the best brand and social media that I think we have in any professional sport, just because they are so unique and are able to take so much advantage of just things that you typically don't see in sports.
No, I agree. And the thing that I've always liked about Formula One is the simple fact that you don't have to be, P1 or P2. There's a lot of entertaining things that are happening in the middle and sometimes at the rear of the pack, right, that can have significance to the entire season. And that's really that's really, I think, where a lot of the entertainment value is.
Yeah, exactly. There's entertainment pretty much everywhere. So I think that's really a great asset that Formula One has. And obviously we've seen it grow massively in this Drive to Survive era. And then I think Mexico will definitely be one of those races that will be featured in Drive to Survive. And I think that the Netflix producers are frothing at the mouth at the McLaren driver battle for the championship. Obviously, one point, the fact, and especially the fact that, everybody knows that the upper echelons at McLaren, they want Lando Norris to win this championship, and they would rather not be Oscar, which is more reasons to support Oscar. But this is going to continue to be the storyline down the stretch, is A, Oscar v. Lando, and then B, the Tyrannosaurus Rex that is Max Verstappen coming along with them.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a very, very interesting fight for the Drivers' Championship. I still think that Max can get P2 in the Drivers' Championship. And one other thought I do have before we go, I still don't believe that the jump in tire grades that Pirelli is offering is making a difference.
Oh, yeah, purely because nobody in their right mind used that hard tire, I would definitely agree with you. I think that Pirelli and the fans and the sport itself got lucky by the fact that it ended up being a predominant two-stop, except for Charles, Lando, and Max. So I think that Pirelli, as we said in predictions, Pirelli needs to continue going back to the drawing board to find the correct balance of tires that's going to give us a good racing tire, but also will force the teams to have a better strategy, which I know is like easier said than done, Kathryn.
Yeah. Well, now let's think about this way for a minute. Now we've seen at least two races where they have skipped a grade between medium and hards.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's take it the opposite way for one of the next four races.
Tried that.
I
want to say that they have, where they did a soft and then a step up between the soft and the mediums. I believe it's happened. I don't know why, but I want to say it was Monaco, and I think it kind of gets lost in the shuffle of like, well, nothing works to fix Monaco, which they're working on it.
Well, nobody can pass in Monaco, but that's another story.
Smaller cars is the answer.
Well, we will find out soon enough. But you've got this C6 out there, and I think they've only had the C6 for one race, maybe two. So let's see what it can do or can't do, as the case may be.
Yeah, that's the question is what capabilities does that, let's call it what it is, we're going back to the days of the super softs.
Exactly.
Let's see what it can do. Maybe they'll try something like that for Sao Paulo in 2 weeks, and that is our next race, which is of course one of our favorites. It is a sprint race, but it is like the one good sprint race on the calendar, which is why once again we do not understand why it's off the sprint calendar next season. But it's a sprint race. It's Sao Paulo. It's one of the most exciting races on the calendar, let's call it on the second half of the calendar. And it is Gabriel Bortoletto's first time as a Formula One driver in his home race. So it will be very exciting for a lot of reasons, but especially for that.
I absolutely agree. I think that this week, Mexico was a lot of fun. There were some great moments in the middle of the track that had some, just great action and great potential. And if you eliminate the virtual safety car, I think you've got a great ending at P2, P3. It could have almost been a drag race through that last turn.
If only. Thanks again,
Yeah.
Rui Marquez.
Yep.
But yeah, we will be back in 2 weeks with our predictions for Sao Paulo. Hopefully, Emily will be able to leave work, but if not, we'll still be here in some way. But yeah, that has been our Mexico City Grand Prix reaction episode. Thanks for going off track with us, guys.
See ya.